What opened the Amazon rainforest to an Italian missionary was a folding razor, the kind used for shaving. No sermon did that. It was done by a blade, an oil lamp, and one night, somewhere along the road to Macas in Ecuador in 1925. There was a bullet to remove, and the one lying on that low platform was a Shua girl, the daughter of a clan chief. Days of travel from any hospital, no doctor, no road, and the whole clan waiting outside. What was at stake was something simple: permission from those who lived inside that forest, without which no one went on to Macas. And inside there was the still heat of the night, voices outside in a language she did not yet understand, and two hands that had to be absolutely steady. The girl lived. The forest then opened. The woman holding the razor was named Maria Troncatti, Italian from a mountain village in the province of Brescia, 42 years old, a nurse trained in a military hospital during the First World War. She had been in Ecuador for 3 years, but up in the mountains outside that forest. The postulator of her cause of canonization, Father Pierluigi Cameroni, sums up that night in a single word: safe conduct. There was no signed paper. It was with a bullet removed by a razor that she earned the right to set foot in that forest, and there she stayed for 44 years. The last time you were laid up in bed, someone took care of you. Write that person's first name in the comments and then read the names beside your own. They come from homes that have never met, and almost all of them belong to people no one ever photographed. If you bring an intention, place it there too. A surgery already scheduled, 2 people in the same family who no longer speak. One thing now, for whoever has a phone in hand. It was not a speech that opened the forest for her. Passed from mouth to mouth, what happened that night traveled ahead of her. Swipe the comment field to the left, and a button marked Hype will appear. One tap, and someone who has never heard this name receives this story. That oil lamp is lit again in the middle of this video. There was one single time she told of that night in her own words, and a name is the first thing the sentence says. Nothing else of hers survives. This story did not come from a medieval manuscript. Maria Troncatti died in 1969, and photographs remain, a small woman in a white veil, standing among barefoot people. There remains as well an Ecuadorian newspaper that reported her death, with the hour and the name of the place. A man alive today had his own body taken as the miracle that raised her to the altars. On the 19th of October, 2025, before St. Peter's Square, Pope Leo XIV declared that Missionary a saint. That Sunday was World Mission Sunday, and the postulator of the cause made a point of saying the date had not fallen there by chance. She has been a saint for 10 months, and almost no one on this side of the world has heard of her. The Pope spoke her name once and only once in the homily that Sunday. He said those new saints were not heroes or champions of some ideal, but authentic men and women, and he placed Sister Maria Troncatti among the evangelizers and the missionary women. Her name does not appear again in that text. One line in a Pope's address covering an entire lifetime in the forest. Today, the 25th of August, the Church marks her day on the calendar. It is not the anniversary of her birth, and it is not the transfer of a relic. It is the exact day of her death, and that is the one the Church chose. To understand how a woman of 42 came to that night, with the razor in her hand and a whole clan waiting outside, you have to go back more than 30 years and climb a mountain in Italy. Up there, goats grazing, and the girl who herded them was reading a magazine. Between 2 mountain valleys, in the province of Brescia in northern Lombardy, sits Corteno Golgi. Maria Benvenuta Troncatti came into the world in that village on the 16th of February, 1883, into a large family of farmers, and she was baptized a day later. As a girl, she went up with the goats to the high pastures and looked after the younger children. Snow for half the year, Mass on foot, a horizon that ended at the peak on the other side of the valley. Her vocation came to her inside a magazine. The village schoolteacher, Margarita Bila, preparing her for the 5th year examination, would put into the girl's hands the Salesian Bulletin, the magazine Don Bosco had founded in 1877 to tell what the missionaries were doing on the other side of the world. It was reading those pages between one lesson and the next that she decided the rest of her life. No apparition, no voice from heaven. Printed paper in a mountain classroom. That same teacher did one other thing for her. She questioned the 6-year-old, saw that the child knew exactly what she was about to receive, and obtained her admission to First Communion before the age usually required. From that day on, Mass every day. At 15, she joined the Parish Association of the Daughters of Mary in her own village, and one sentence of hers is recorded in the documents of the cause in the first person, short as an order: "I must be a missionary." Her father refused. Giacomo Troncatti did not favor his daughter's choice, and in those days, without a father's permission, one had to wait for legal age, which came at 21. She waited. In October of 1905, she left the mountain house and went down to Nizza Monferrato, in the province of Asti, where the mother house of the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians stood. The devotional sources of the Salesian family tell that her father fainted when she left. She made her religious profession on the 17th of September, 1908. Her first years of religious life were spent in Varazze, in Liguria, and they were not healthy years. An infection in one finger dragged on for months and was at one point judged very serious by the doctor. Then came typhoid fever. During one of those illnesses, in the infirmary at Nizza Monferrato, the one who stopped at her bedside was Don Michele Rua, the first successor of Don Bosco at the head of the Salesians, today a blessed. He blessed her and said she would have a laborious life into old age. She knew the sickbed before she ever cared for anyone who was sick. In the first months of 1915, the town of Varazze offered a course in nursing and Red Cross work to care for the wounded in case of war. Italy would enter the First World War in May of that year. She took the course and went to work in the military hospital. The decree of the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, published in 2024, records the fact in one dry line. During the First World War, Sister Maria followed courses in healthcare at Varazze and worked as a Red Cross nurse in the military hospital. It was on young men brought from the Italian front that those hands learned the whole trade. The water came into Varazze on the 25th of June 1915. It was a flood, and she and another sister escaped by very little. With the water rising, she made a promise the sisters recorded word for word. "Mary, Help of Christians, I promise you that if you save me from this flood, I will go as a missionary. I promise, but save Giacomino as well." Giacomino was her youngest brother, a soldier. Both of them were saved. She would spend the next 54 years paying that debt. Genoa, September of 1918. She was sent to a house that cared for girls made refugees by the war. 2 months later, the war ended, and that was when she made her official request for the missions. She asked for something concrete. She wanted to go to the lepers. She insisted on it for years. The tradition of the house preserves a scene from March of 1922, and it is told this way. At the bedside of a boarding student named Marina Luzzi, who was in her last days, she asked the young woman that, when she saw the Virgin, she would obtain from Jesus that she go as a missionary among the lepers. The young woman is said to have answered no, that she would go as a missionary to Ecuador. She pressed again about the lepers. The girl repeated Ecuador and died on the 14th of March. A few days later, the notice came from the Superior General with the destination Ecuador. This scene is on the official site of the cause and is not in the documents of the dicastery. It stands, as it is told, as the memory of a house. She sailed on the 9th of November 1922, at 39 years of age, with Mother Caterina Mioletti and 3 other sisters. The first 2 years were in Chunchi, a small town in the Andes, where she set up what was called there a botiquín, a makeshift pharmacy with a corner for treating whoever came. White people and indigenous people alike began to call her La Madre Física, which in that mountain Spanish meant, quite simply, the doctor. And then came the order that changed everything. In November of 1925, she set out with the missionary bishop Domenico Comín and two sisters toward Macas on the far side of the mountains, already in the Amazon basin. It took days on horseback and on foot, crossing a pass called Pilas at 3,000 meters, with mountain cold in the morning and damp forest heat in the afternoon. They reached Macas on the 4th of December 1925 on the Feast of the Purissima, the image of Our Lady around which that mission had been born. Somewhere along that road, a Shuar group came out to meet them. Those who waited outside that house are called Shuar, and in their language the word Shuar means people. They are today the largest Amazonian people of Ecuador and the second most numerous indigenous nationality in the country, between 80 and 110,000 people spread across southeastern Ecuador and northern Peru. For centuries, outsiders called them by a name they had not chosen, one that came to mean savage. They reject that name. Their name is Shuar. And there is one thing that has to be said honestly. She herself used the old form with affection and called them my little gibberos. That was the way people spoke in her time. It is recorded in the official texts of the cause, and it is not the way we speak today. This video says Shuar, which is what that people call themselves. That was the first meeting of those missionaries with a Shuar group, and it happened on the road to Macas. No primary source gives the day, and so this video will give no day at all. It was in 1925 or shortly after. The sister was asked to heal a young woman of the group, the daughter of a chief. There was a bullet, and there was no time. The Salesian sources preserved the chief's words, and they left no room at all. If the young woman did not live, those women would not go on to Macas. She had a nurse's bag and nothing more. There was no operating room. There was no x-ray, no anesthetist, no road on which to carry the young woman anywhere better. And the only authority in that place was outside, waiting. When the church declared her blessed, in 2012, Cardinal Angelo Amato went up to the altar in Macas and said in the homily something one does not normally say at a celebration. He said Sister Maria was not a superficial believer because she had been for many years a good nurse. Notice what that means. The church, on the day it raised her to the altars for the first time, thought it necessary to put in writing that this woman knew what she was doing with a blade in her hand. Before they began, they prayed. They prayed to Mary, help of Christians, the devotion at the heart of the Salesian family, and the devotion of her whole life. Then someone brought the oil lamp closer. Picture the scene for a moment, a flame that trembles with any movement of air, the smell of smoke and wet earth, a low platform, the silence inside against the voices outside. She took up the razor. Only once did she tell of that night, and the sentence has crossed 100 years just as it left her mouth. The Virgin helped me. I saw a miracle. I managed to remove the bullet, which was near the heart. It was she who called it a miracle, not the narrator of this story. And it was the clan waiting outside that opened the way. The missionaries went on to Macas. Father Pierluigi Cameroni, the postulator of her cause, sums up that night in a single word, and it is the word that gives this video its name. That was a safe conduct into the Amazon jungle. From that night on, the Shuar began to call her Madrecita, and the elders called her the good little grandmother. Those are two names given to someone who belongs to the household, and neither one has anything to do with a habit, a mission, or a religion. Vatican News, writing about her on the anniversary of her death, ties the two together in a single sentence. She won the trust of that people by saving the daughter of a chief, and from then on, everyone knew her by that name. In a letter to her family, she described what that name became in daily life. If you could see how much they love me. When they see me climb onto a horse, they call after me, Madrecita, come back soon. That is what you say to someone of your own house who is going out, not to a foreigner you tolerate. Macas, Mendez, Sucua, and Sevilla Don Bosco, 4 places that exist to this day in southeastern Ecuador, and in all 4 she lived, cared for the sick, and grew old. Sevilla Don Bosco was born on the other side of the Upano River, on the spot where centuries earlier an old Spanish settlement had flourished. There was only one interruption in those 44 years. From 1934 to 1938, she was taken out of the forest to direct a charitable house in Guayaquil on the coast. Then she came back and never left again. The old law of that land was known to everyone and fit into a single line. One death was paid for with another. It was against that line that she lived for 4 decades. A missionary had crossed an ocean to speak of Christ. The first thing she did in that forest was care for a girl, and that is exactly the order given in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 25, verse 36, on the lips of Jesus describing the day of judgment. I was sick, and you visited me. It is not written, I preached to you, and you listened. It is written, I was sick, and you visited me. Before there was a hospital in Sukua, the only doctor in that region was not a doctor. The line comes from Cardinal Amato in the same homily at Macas, and it is literal. Before the hospital of Sukua was built, Sister Maria was the only physician in the area. She held no diploma in anything at all. She had a nursing course from 1915, a military hospital behind her, and an entire forest ahead of her. What she practiced is listed in the Salesian sources and in Vatican News, and the list runs like this: nursing, surgery, orthopedics, dentistry, anesthesia, and pharmacy. The documents of the process record working days of 16 to 17 hours. One witness, Laura Alvarado, described the sound of it before dawn. You could hear her small footsteps, and people would say, "Here comes Sister Maria." She worked by day and by night. Across the whole region, she was known by a name that needs no explanation: the Doctor of the Forest. In the early 1950s, a brick hospital opened in Sukua, named after Pope Pius XII, and its direction was handed to her. She left the post in 1963 at 80 years of age and went on caring for the sick. Don Bosco, the founder of the religious family she belonged to, used to tell his own, "My children, I do not recommend penances or disciplines to you, but work, work, work." And to those who worked with him, he promised 3 things, in this order: bread, work, and paradise. She kept her side of that bargain in a place where the first 2 were scarce. 2 sentences of hers explain how she managed to sleep after a day like that. The first said to those who received medicine from her hand, "I give you the remedies, but the one who obtains your healing is Mary, help of Christians." The second said to a doctor who had finally reached the region and hesitated before a difficult operation, "While you operate, I will pray." She never presented herself as the owner of the outcome. She presented herself as the one whose hands were free at that moment. Since the mission had no vaccines against venom, Sister Maria learned from the indigenous healers how to use herbs in cases of poisoning. It is written that way, in those words, in the homily of the Beatification, read aloud before the whole world. The woman who had crossed an ocean to teach sat down and learned from those who were there before her. Herbs against snake venom, in a place with no antivenom and days away from any pharmacy. The experience she built up in Ecuador was gained alongside a doctor of Jewish origin, Dr. Ottolenghi, who had fled Nazi Europe. It is in the same document, with his name written out in full. An Italian sister and a Jewish doctor who had escaped Hitler, caring for the sick side by side in a forest town, while on the other side of the ocean, his world was burning. She also touched something far harder to change than a body. The documents of the cause record that Shuar women were burdened by their dependence on husbands who owned them, and that marriages were contracted between families. In 1930, in Macas, the first Christian marriage of 2 young Shuar, by their own free choice, was celebrated. The free consent of the bride and groom is the very matter the sacrament is made of, and in that village, in that year, it was an entire social change happening inside a chapel. Hundreds of new families came after that one. And in 1962, she organized courses for the young women: nursing, cutting and sewing, cooking, hygiene, care of children, preparation for marriage. A newborn arrived at the mission, wrapped in a rag, carried by his little sister. Because their mother had died in a vendetta, she raised them both. The boy was named Jose Maria, and as a grown man he told those gathering the testimonies that he remembered no one in his life, only Sister Maria. Not everything ended well, and there is one case that shows the price of staying. The daughter of a Shuar chief died of tetanus at the mission. The father crossed the forest to demand an accounting, and he came with the clan behind him. Her answer is recorded in the documents of the process. "Kill me, if you wish, but I cannot give your daughter back to you, because neither I nor you are the owner of her life." God is the owner, and he took her. Tempers cooled. The chief asked forgiveness, and everyone went to the girl's Christian burial. At the end of the 1960s, the peace she had built began to crack for a reason that had nothing to do with her. Settlers were pushing onto Shuar land, and the settlers saw the Silesian mission as an ally of the indigenous people. First came the warnings, then the open threats. On the night of the 4th of July, 1969, a fire set on purpose destroyed the mission of Sukua. Years of work burned in a single night. The Silesian chronicles tell that the next morning, the mission courtyard was full of people ready to answer in kind. She was 86 years old, and that is where she stepped in between. The documents of the cause say that she begged the leaders of the Federation to rule out any thought of revenge, and that she would offer herself as a victim for the sake of peace. It was not a striking phrase said once. The testimonies gather the same thing from her own mouth. In plain Spanish, "I am offering my life to our Lord for the good of white people and Shuar alike." She offered her own life so that the old debt would stop being collected. 20 days before the end, on the 5th of August 1969, at the feast of the Purissima in Macas, she took Sister Pierina Rusconi aside and told her something, binding her to repeat nothing before it happened. "The Purissima told me to prepare myself, because something grave is soon going to happen to me." The sister kept the secret. It is in the official text of the cause, with her name and with the condition of silence. On the 25th of August 1969, she said goodbye to the community to travel to Quito for the annual spiritual exercises. She reached the airstrip at Sukua, with the small plane's engines already running. The aircraft came down shortly after leaving the runway, a kilometer from the town. The rest is in the archives of the newspaper El Universo of Guayaquil, which republished them decades later. It was a twin-engine plane of the Tau Company on the route between Sukua and Cuenca. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the pilot felt the engines fail and made a forced landing beside the road to Mendez. The aircraft broke in two. The General Directorate of Civil Aviation learned of the accident 4 minutes after it happened, and at 4 in the afternoon, the Standing Commission of Investigation left Quito. The newspaper called her the director of the Silesian mission in Sukua and gave the figure that is the hardest fact in this whole story. There were 5 injured, and the only one who died was she. It is not this video that ties her offering to the accident. It is the dicastery for the causes of saints in the decree on the miracle, signed on the 25th of November 2024, and the link is written there without any conditional. Sister Maria died in a tragic air accident at Sukua on the 25th of August 1969, offering her life for the reconciliation between the settlers and the indigenous people. 52 days earlier, her mission had burned, and the Gospel of St. John in chapter 15, verse 13, had already given the measure. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The news of her death was given out over a radio station she had helped bring into existence. In 1961, she supported the idea of a federation that would defend the rights of the people of the forest. The Federation of Shuar Centers was born in 1964, with its seat in Sukua, and it is held to be the first broad-based indigenous organization in Latin America, a pioneer in education by radio, in their own language. It was that station that broke into its programming on that late afternoon in August. The sentence that went out on the air was this: Our mother, Sister Maria Troncatti, is dead. Shuaren settlers, who that year had almost come to blows with one another, said the same thing before the coffin, and the official site of the cause has gathered the two versions side by side. My mother has died. A saint has died. After the last farewell, the sisters who were there tell that a rainbow appeared in the sky, and that it stayed until the moment of burial. They read it as a covenant accepted. The church has declared nothing about this, and neither does this video. It is the witnesses who tell it, and that is how it stands. But notice the pattern that closes. The sign of the bow in the cloud is the sign of Genesis chapter 9 verse 13 given to Noah after the waters. I set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. 54 years earlier, inside a flood, a young religious had promised to be a missionary if she came out of that water alive. Jua Bosco is a carpenter of the Shuar people, born in 1975 in the province of Morona, Santiago, married to Natalina, father of 6 children. On the morning of the 2nd of February 2015, there was an accident at work in the shop where he was sanding boards. Jua lost consciousness right there. What came next was a race against geography. They carried him on a makeshift stretcher, on foot to the next village, then by canoe along the river, then in an air ambulance. He reached the hospital at Macas 2 hours later, and from there he was transferred to the hospital at Ambato, where he spent long hours in surgery. The neurosurgeon called in his brother-in-law and said there was no hope. The brother-in-law did not argue with the doctor. He laid an image of Maria Troncatti on Jua's chest and began to call on her. When he was discharged, still fed through a tube, into a borrowed apartment in Macas, the family hung a large picture of her on the bedroom wall. Between the end of March and April of that year, Jua had a dream. He dreamed of a woman dressed in white who said she was Sister Maria Troncatti, who cared for him and assured him of his healing. On waking, he moved his arm and his leg and spoke a few words. No speech or memory rehabilitation was carried out afterward. There were only a few sessions of physiotherapy. At a medical examination made in 2022, the healing is described as complete, 100%, with no lasting effects. On the 7th of March 2024, the Medical Board of the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints declared that healing rapid, complete and lasting and inexplicable according to the laws of science. The decree was issued on the 25th of November 2024, authorized by Pope Francis. It was not the first. For the beatification, the Church had already recognized the healing of a woman of the Diocese of Porto Viejo, also in Ecuador, whose family had already taken her home to die. Now set the two things side by side. An Italian woman entered that forest because she removed a bullet with a razor, and a Shuar girl lived. Almost 90 years later, the one who raised her to the altars was a Shuar man who came back from a place no one comes back from. Her first gesture opened a forest. The last one opened St. Peter's Square. As soon as he could walk, Jua went on foot with his brother-in-law to the shrine at Macas to give thanks, and he was in Rome with his family on the 19th of October 2025, the day she was canonized. At the same altar on the same Sunday, there also rose a Venezuelan lay doctor who treated the poor for nothing, Jose Gregorio Hernandez, a doctor without money and a nurse without a diploma, on the same day. Her remains rest today in Sucua, in the province of Morona, Santiago, in the same ground where she died. On the 24th of August 2025, on the eve of the anniversary of her death, the foundation stone of a shrine bearing her name was blessed there. And the Salesian Bulletin, that magazine which made her a missionary in a mountain classroom, still comes out in dozens of countries, with news of missionaries nobody knows. From 4 to 5 in the morning every day, she stayed before the Blessed Sacrament. The witnesses in the process told this with the hour marked. A woman named Dorinda Cale Palacios told that she would reach the church at 3:30 in the morning and always find Sister Maria already inside, praying the stations of the Way of the Cross. The advice she gave to anyone who asked her for advice was always the same, and there was nothing complicated about it. Do not give up the Holy Rosary. Have faith in the Eucharist. Do not stay away from communion. Do not miss Holy Mass. And the explanation of it all in the shortest sentence she left behind: one look at the crucifix gives me life and courage to work. And about the life she chose at 22 and lived until she was 86. Every day I am happier in my religious missionary vocation. Now think of whoever cared for you when you were sick. Perhaps it was a mother, a wife, a son, a neighbor. None of those people studied for it, and none of them were paid. That is exactly the material out of which God made a saint on this 25th of August, hands that were available in a place where there was no one else. And look at what is in your hand right now. She had a razor, and she used the razor. She did not wait for the hospital, she did not wait for the diploma, she did not wait for ideal conditions, she did not wait for the world to become safe. She used what she had on the night she needed it, and that opened to her 44 years of life, in a place almost no one else ever reached. If you know someone who spends their life caring for others and believes they do nothing important, send this story to that person today. Saint Maria Troncatti, pray for us.